Happy New Year, everyone. Out with the old, in with the new agenda. Today we look into the crystal ball, offer some predictions, and maybe even a resolution or two. The agenda is set for 2013. It's time to talk. Power and politics in Germany, a major election year. Chancellor Angela Merkel and her conservatives will face off against the Social Democrats. Why Europe should take notice and why it may be an election without much flair. 200 years ago, one of Germany's greatest musical minds was born, and today his music still inspires our ears and haunts our souls. Wagner, for many, the genius of opera, loved for his music, hated for his beliefs, an icon for the darkest chapter in German history. Today, his great-grandson talks with us about a beautiful and an ugly legacy. And how many of you have promised yourself to live better this year? Would resolutions even matter if we knew that we could live forever? Time, our friend, our enemy. Today, many begin getting rid of those bad habits. They begin living healthy, trying to make the most of the time we have. Well, today we ponder that very human desire to beat the clock and become eternal. Well, I've invited three people today to talk, argue, and pry apart these ideas and issues. My first guest says that the quest to conquer death is as old as humankind, and he's put his thoughts into a brilliant book called Immortality, The Quest to Live Forever and How It Drives Civilization. I'm happy to welcome to the show Stephen Cave. Stephen, it's good to have you on the show. It is so fundamental that we almost can't help ourselves. I mean, would you say that we are programmed to defy time?
Our instinct is to defy time. But I think if we come to terms with time passing, our lives will in fact be better. Okay,
a positive outlook there. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. My second guest is a good example of how people can indeed become immortal. They ensure that their genes are passed on to future generations. I'm happy to welcome to the show the great-grandson of Richard Wagner, Mr. Gottfried Wagner. Mr. Wagner, it's good to have you on the show. The legacy of your great-grandfather transcends generations. A brilliant musician, but also a racist, an anti-Semite, a man who was very sexist in the way he thought. Should we separate the music from the man?
You cannot separate that. It's proven within his life, works, and also concretely in his theories. So there's a very close connection between these elements.
All right, we're going to talk about those close connections in just a moment. And my next guest is letting me turn the tables on him today. My colleague from DW's talk show, Talking Germany, Hajo Schumacher, is with us. Hajo is the author of the book, let me get this right here, Hajo, The 12 Laws of Power and the Secret of Angela Merkel's Success. So, it sounds very good. Congratulations on the title itself. You say one reason that she is so powerful is because she appears to be so boring. Is that going to work for her this year?
Boring is a bad word. Let's call it reliable. She's kind of VW Golf. Coincidentally, the car she drives herself.
Is a Volkswagen?
A Volkswagen, and that's her type of style. And people had... It took a while. It's not the Schröder style. It's the Merkel style, and she will...
Okay, I've never heard her compared to a Volkswagen before. That's a new one, too. We'll have to see what people say about that in the new year. Well, she wants to win again. German Chancellor Angela Merkel will try to win a third term in national elections later this year. And it appears that she is taking notes on how U.S. President Barack Obama won and how his Republican challenger Mitt Romney lost. Merkel apparently doesn't want her conservatives to go the way of the Republicans. More and more party seats are being filled with women and minorities. Merkel wants to appeal to more urban voters. There is more talk about the party being in the 21st century. Well, you get the picture here. Perhaps the biggest question right now, does anyone have the popular magnetism to convert Merkel from a political positive to a big negative?
2013 sees Germany in election fever with parliamentary elections in the autumn. Chancellor Angela Merkel is casting her hat back into the ring, and her conservative CDU party is riding high in opinion polls. It appears she's on course to be re-elected. Her main challenger is Per Steinbrück from the Social Democratic Party. He's gotten off to a rocky start, with media attention focusing on payments received for speaking engagements. The former finance minister now faces an uphill battle. One thing is certain, Germany will have another coalition government. The voting system ensures that no one party has ever won an overall majority. The Pirate Party could be the spoiler in the race. After success in state elections, they hope to clear the 5% hurdle at national level and inject a bit of colour into Bundestag proceedings.
Hayo, help us explain this for our international audience. When they see elections going on in Italy, for example, or in Britain, or in France, or even when we look at the United States, being a rock star has a lot of capital now in politics. And you're saying the very opposite applies to German politics. Why are Germans the oddballs here?
Well, we had a few rock stars. They're all gone. Even Sarkozy is gone in France, so maybe it's a trend, and we are the trendsetters in Germany. German elections are quite boring. They're not this. It's not this glam thing like in the United States. The people have, I think, a deep distrust. If they see too much show, then they say, "What's behind the curtain?" So they're.
But it wasn't always that way. I mean, if I look back, if people have followed German politics, when Gerhard Schröder was chancellor, he was known for he liked to show that he was a little bit more than a man of the people.
Oh, but just a little bit more.
Yeah, but he still showed that.
He had to eat currywurst, he had to drink beer with the people. He was no show. I mean, compared to Helmut Kohl, Edmund Stoiber, Frank-Walter Steinmeier, whatever we had the last years, he was a little bit more show type of person, but German politics are quite normal. If you watch the states, the Bundesländer, names like Olaf Scholz, Hannelore Kraft, Kurt Beck, where you can look wherever you want, even in Bavaria. Okay, Horst Seehofer is a little bit more Bavarian style, but that's German politics.
Is there something special about Angela Merkel? You know, she has been rated as one of the most powerful women in the world, one of the most respected women in the world. I mean, she has a reach that goes far beyond Germany. She's hated in some places in Europe right now. She's loved in other places. What does she have that makes her so special for this moment?
Already 8 years on the job. She's one of the, I think, long-serving
chancellors.
Not chancellors, but in Europe, prime ministers. Just because she's not this kind of show person, she's more a marathon runner. She knows politics is something like, what you need is patience. And even people who didn't like her before, now they say, okay, it wasn't too bad how she managed, for example, the Euro crisis. I mean, nobody knows what will come in this year and the next years. Yeah, sure. But up to now, she did a quite good job. The Euro system is still keeping together. Greece is still in the team. And say 2-3 years ago, the people were quite afraid. They were thinking about, do we have to change our euros in gold, or do we have to bring it to Switzerland? Nothing happened.
Because
the euro is still
calm.
there. So she's kind of, reliable.
Yeah, she's reliable.
And the Berlusconis are coming and going, and the Sarkozys, and she's always still.
Is it to her advantage? Is there something to her advantage for being a woman? I mean, maybe even the question is sexist.
She never played that card. She never played this feminism card. Never, ever. I think her biggest advantage is to be, in her first life in the DDR in Eastern Germany, she was a physicist.
She was a physicist, yes.
So,
a scientist,
And this is a quite unusual background for politicians. Most of the time they are just civil servants or lawyers or teachers, but the scientific background is it's not normal. So she's just thinking a bit, maybe 1, 2, 3 steps ahead.
Let me open this up a little bit. Let me ask you, Mr. Wagner, is a strength of of German politics, and maybe a strength of Angela Merkel, the fact that it seems so solid and frankly so boring. I mean, you know, we deal with the Italians all the time, right?
Yes, but, you know, then I cannot agree with you what you talked about Berlusconi. They are not coming and going. Berlusconi, unfortunately, is at charge since 1992. So we are always hoping that to get rid of him, because I mean, this generally.
I meant the type, you know.
Okay,
the type.
but the type. Okay, but anyway, he is absolutely a unique figure in Italian history, with the mass media manipulation also. So we are, in a certain way, we would be in Italy. One would be happy to have someone like Merkel for Italy to create a more stable situation. We have now Mr. Monti,
and some people have called Monti the male Merkel. The male version of Angela Merkel.
I mean, they have many things in common. He is much more analytic. But, you know, it's for Italy. It's very important to have a personality like Monti, who really has enormous, also, I think, education on this issue. It's not only being in the struggle of daily life politics, which are disgusting, as we know. No?
Which are disgusting. Steve, let me ask you. I mean, you as a Brit, you see things from the outside as well, but you also live here in Germany. It's hard when you're trying to talk to people outside of Germany, when you're trying to convince them about how the political system here works. Most people do say, wow, it sounds really boring. But as Hayo says, it is the key to its success. Would you agree?
I agree. From the outside point of view, German politics seems to have a lot of people involved, but nothing ever happens. And I think that's just fine. I think the fact that German politics is so boring shows that actually Germany has got it right. Most people here aren't looking for a new vision. Employment is at record high. The social welfare system is reliable. Most people in history would love to be in the position of most Germans. And because of that, people aren't seeking anything new. So I think Germans have a right to a boring politics.
A right to boring politics. Wow, that's when you try to sell that at a political meeting.
Yeah, we write that in the Constitution.
Put that in your book, Hayo.
That's all right. Yeah.
Hayo, it is 2013. It is a huge election year. What will the issues be that will define this election? Look into your crystal ball.
It will be the euro, of course, because people are afraid what's going to happen with the money. It will be social welfare, not in the classical way, but we have quite a split between poorer people are becoming poorer, richer. It's like everywhere in the world. And the candidate of the Social Democrats, Per Steinbrück, maybe to answer the question this way, he says, what we need, we have to bring this group, we have to get rid of this gap, we have to bring the people closer together. That's maybe a good strategy, but it's really difficult to put that in a good slogan.
Do you think that speaks to people too? Because as Stephen was saying, unemployment is relatively low in Germany. Most people, when you talk to them, say that they're content. And isn't it hard to get people to change course when they look around and they say, well, you know, things aren't half bad?
We don't have that, what we had in 1998 at the end of the Kohl era. It was a Wechselstimmung.
A change in the mood.
Atmosphere of we need something new. The people are not just they're not tired of Angela Merkel. So that's her biggest advantage. Her second really great advantage is, in fact, she's a social democrat. She's not really conservative. She's right in the middle.
And that's what isn't she trying to almost reinvent her conservatives to make sure that they don't become old-fashioned and part of history?
That's a second problem, because the typical conservative has still a problem with Angela Merkel because she is not really conservative. There's no family, there are no kids, she's Protestant.
She's a woman, she's a scientist.
She's from Eastern Germany, so it doesn't fit in a conservative mind. But that is her biggest advantage. Like Helmut Kohl as well, he was a kind of social democrat. He was taking care of all the people. He was not this classical, say, US-style conservative who says we have to cut back all the social welfares and that. No, they're just spreading the money, and that's quite a good strategy for winning elections.
Is Is this going to be an opportunity? Let's assume that Merkel will win this year. Let's just assume that for a second. Is this the chapter, the opening of a chapter where we will see her become recognized as an international stateswoman?
She already is.
Yeah.
Her biggest problem is that she will win the elections. The Conservatives become the strongest party, but she will lose the job, because the Social Democrats and the Greens together might get more votes than Angela Merkel's party becomes. So it could be that she will win, but loses at the same time, because her coalition partner now, the Liberals, we have this 5% hurdle, right. And if they do something like 4.8, she might get, say, 40%, but Social Democrats and Greens get 45 together.
Okay, so this is a bombshell you're dropping here now, Hayo. So you're saying actually her Conservatives and the FDP, they may not garner enough votes to win the election, which means the Social Democrats could win, but the people would still like to see Merkel as their chancellor.
We had that before, when we had the Great Coalition in 2005. Yeah. We have something like a test, in Lower Saxony. In the end of January, there will be elections in Hanover. Yeah. And they have quite the same, a very similar situation. They have a popular prime minister.
State premier, yeah.
And he's in the lead, but Social Democrats and Greens are together stronger, and the Liberals are now around 4% in the polls. So it might be, a first impression of what can happen in September.
Okay, but you're convinced.
But it's very, very open. If my crystal ball is completely dark, because nobody knows, will we have a parliament with 3 parties? CDU, Merkel party, Social Democrats, Greens, or will we have 6 parties? Liberals, Pirates, and Left.
Exactly.
So it's very, very open. And the only thing we can say for sure, it will be narrow.
Okay, I mean, this is our New Year's Day program, so we are allowed to make a few predictions. No one will be punished for being wrong or right. Will Merkel remain chancellor? Yes or no, Hayo?
I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Wagner?
I think so too.
Stephen?
Yes, but then probably in alliance with the Greens.
Okay, in alliance with the Greens. All right.
That's an interesting point.
See? Yeah. There you go. Lots of possibilities there. All right, let's move on now to a man who owns a place in so much of Germany, from its politics to its music. I'm talking about Richard Wagner. He was born 200 years ago. And in his life, he composed some of the greatest operas of all time. The classical music world would not be the same without him. Wagner was also a man with an abrasive and distasteful picture of himself and the world around him. He regarded himself as the, quote, most German of men. And he saw people as those who belong and those who don't. Racist, anti-Semitic, sexist. The adjectives ring just as loudly as his operas. So this year, the world will spend a lot of time doing some mental gymnastics, remembering a musical genius and an icon of hate.
Richard Wagner, a giant among classical music composers. A man of extraordinary brilliance, whose music enthralls listeners. As a composer, he rewrote the rules of opera. His blend of music, myth and drama placed it on a scale never seen before. Wagner died long before the Nazis came to power in Germany, but they drew upon another aspect of his legacy, his anti-Semitism and agenda of German nationalism. The Bayreuth Festival is an annual celebration of Wagner's music and testament to his enduring popularity. But while undoubtedly a genius, is it possible to separate the music from the man and his odious views?
Mr. Wagner, what does your great-grandfather mean today?
He is an enormous, important figure for the history of opera, first of all, today, when I talk about today, but means also automatically a very contradictory figure, even in the political, cultural context. So we always have to confront on one side, the enormous role in the history of music, on the other side of what he wanted to reach with his medium opera. Because we're talking about opera. And opera is not only beautiful music. Opera, in the case of Wagner, contains the music, the libretto, the Wagner case, the theory, means also the building which we have seen here, the Festspielhaus, and even his publication called the Bayreuther Blätter, Bayreuth Leaves. So Wagner was a man who today would have a television, his own studio.
Yeah, you were saying he'd have his own channel with his operas playing 24 hours a day.
Exactly. This is very important that Wagner would have today a channel where he would speak alone for 24 hours every day.
Who would he be friends with today, Mr. Wagner?
I think he would be close to with Berlusconi and Maddox and all those people who really dominate the media scene. So Wagner, at this point, is absolutely a man of today with what he understood. I mean, it's interesting. He was always in the right moment, at the right, you can say, a little bit Bakunin, a little bit for 1 week. You know, he had traced revolt. Then later on, as we know, he switches over to King Ludwig II. Wagner cannot be seen without being involved deeply also there, again, in politics. Without him, there would be no Master Singer, no Tristan the Soldier, the Ring, and the Parsifal. So these are the major so-called Musikdramen, always in combination, closest combination with German politics.
Do you think that people should try to rehabilitate his image 200 years later?
I mean, the Wagner, it's always like that. When you talk about Wagner, it's always very controversial. That means even in my field also of music historians, let's talk about might be a little bit more seriously about that you are put in the corner of being an Wagnerian or anti-Wagnerian, no? Which is too simple altogether. I think that confronting Wagner means you should not only glorify him or only, let's say, see him as the devil in intonation. He is both, and of course the sometimes schizophrenic approach. On one side, he is like, I'm only an artist, wonderful music, but he is declaring and putting his work always in connection with the Weltrevolution. So he gives it himself always a very strong political message for the future. So on one side, he failed. He failed completely. He had to live in exile. So, but in the time when he was in exile, he himself, he never gave up to read up Bakunin and Proudhon and all the radicals. So on the other side, he was holding hand with King Ludwig II. So
that's a typical artist.
No, but this is a little bit too easy when you want to change society.
I'm journalist, sorry.
Yes, but it is too easy. Wagner, then please again, let's read very, very carefully what he really wrote in connection with this work. I do not want to bore with a lot of theories, but it's not only an artist. Wagner was also highly an intellectual who writes a work like
artists can be intellectual.
Yes.
But Mr. Wagner, is it important though? Is it important now? I mean, we're talking about 200 years since his birth. Is it important? Is it possible for people to just solely concentrate on his music?
No, absolutely not.
But there are people who do that. There are people who say we that's all we're interested in. We're classical music lovers, and that's what we're interested in. No. Are you saying are they being irresponsible if they don't know the whole man?
They really do not understand all about Wagner. Wagner wrote music always in connection. He created his own poetry, his libretto. We have the so-called leitmotifs, which are referring to very concretely to texts. So we have a very concrete situation, which is in the drama. So you cannot say, I'm just closing up my eyes and has nothing to do.
What about the way we portray Wagner today? Based on what you're saying, would you be happier if we were to take his operas and have no stage, and if his operas were comprised of just the text and the music, and that's it?
No, not at all. Not at all, because Wagner, his medium was at that time the opera. So he is also a theater man, of course, and is, of course, with enormous talent. But it always remains that we, with the knowledge of Wagner, the experience of Wagner for 130 years, we know all how it could end up. Connection, we have seen Hitler. So we have this learning from history, hopefully something, even make the dark sides within the work within the biography transfer, we have that. So you, as a producer and as a stage director, whatever, you have a lot of responsibility to talk about Wagner, and you should not always show only one side. And this is what
I'm always interpreting Wagner,
yes.
right? And,
yes.
and someone like Wagner, I mean, he sets a lot of traps, doesn't he?
Yes, he said a lot, but unfortunately, he always put it together in the context with the performance. Wagner also is very clearly expressing himself because he was stage director. He was also a conductor. So Wagner had enormous impact how it should be put on stage. When you conducting your work yourself, when you make your own stage direction on the Bayreuth set, then you say very clearly, in this direction should be, and I define it even with my own newspaper. So here, Wagner is very, and this of course should be blended away, one should not talk about it, but this has to be done. It's a part of the education for next generation internationally. Wagner is an international phenomenon, and we should not grow up also in the United States. I'm teaching a lot, even including also Israel now. You should give them what's all about the package. That means not blend in whatever we are not in a supermarket. You take just out what you want and make out of that. You have a lot of responsibility.
So what about the notion of playing Wagner, for example, in Israel? You know, Barenboim, I think he played, I think I was reading that he played, there was some opera, some works that he played there, and he asked the audience, do you want to hear this? And some people got up and walked out.
Okay,
what do you say about that?
I'm present the Wagner discussion in Israel since more than 20 years, so I know really by own experience.
Yes.
Of course, Wagner should be also be performed in Israel, but with also confronting, first of all, those who really had to listen to Wagner in Auschwitz. So we should respect that. If you have lost your parents, no, or your family in the sound of Wagner, it's a nightmare. And we should highly please respect that. Then we have the next generation, the children, the grandchildren. But there again, I'm talking about my own experience. Yes. So we have to read together Mein Kampf in combination with Judaism and music. This is what I'm doing. I'm not giving this kind of, split up. No, I fully disagree with Daniel Barenboim. He talks only about most of all the beauty of the music. No, I would lie. Now also being a descendant of Wagner, no, I have to give them the full package.
What's your responsibility being his great-grandson? I mean, obviously we can tell you certainly inherited his passion, because when you talk about it, I mean it's you know, it's contagious.
I'm living also in Italy, you know. This is a passion. I mean, having a wife who's a mayor also of a city, so I'm involved with that. So
I was wondering how many espressos you had before the show. Too.
I do not need an espresso because I'm a passionate.
You just are.
So I do not apologize for that. No, I'm just a human being individually.
Yes.
Why should be German always in all
that? What's your responsibility? I mean, do you feel a burden being his great-grandson?
I will tell you, it was a burden for me, but I confronted that burden, and I went to Israel directly in front of a really huge halls and said, yes, you know, I'm coming from this line, but we have to talk about it. Because there are so-called many Yakkes in the hall who want to hear. They laughed there, Wagner in Berlin, Bruno Walter, whatever. So we have to talk about it. No? And to being very frank and not hide anything. And this is the way how it should be done in an open society. We always have to talk about the painful aspects.
Have you come to terms with being his great-grandson?
Of course I have come, because when you are in Israel and when you are really confronted with the extreme opposition, you know, everything what you say is what will he say next, you know, and the complete control, every point must be right. So, you know, I'm never used, because it's always a very delicate question.
What about Germany?
Germany is very different.
Has Germany come to terms with...
No, not at all. There's always a very unbalanced... It's always being a Wagnerian or anti-Wagnerian. There's a kind of a hatred, sometimes of discussion. I think the Wagner societies divide people who are not and who are. I think this is terrible.
It's similar to what Wagner himself would have done.
Yes, but I think it's very negative. I like the Anglo-Saxon discussion that you can sit here, you can... I was even in Leipzig. Next year we have Leipzig. I could not finish up one lecture I had there. They really, in a very rude way, I was interrupted, and I don't like that. It's
by
part.
Anti-Wagnerians?
No, there was Mendelssohn Conservatory.
Okay.
They did not even let me enter, and they insulted me in a very vulgar way. There was the discussion what was about Mendelssohn and Wagner in the city.
More complicated.
And more complicated.
Yeah.
But these are the topics which we have to discuss.
And these are topics that could give us, material for 2 more shows, Mr. Wagner. Before we move on, I just want to ask you, in this year, 2013,
yes,
the world will be thinking a lot about Wagner. What is the one message you hope people take?
He's a very contradictory character, and we should also talk about his dark and also about very important roles, and not blend in and only glorify Wagner. This is my hope for this year.
Okay, very good. Well said. Well, try, and try again. Now, that seems to be the motto of every January when people around the world make promises to themselves to use the time that they have left in a better way. And yet, at the same time, humans are racing to beat time. Now, we want to live forever. Now, there are several ways we can do that, staying healthy in this body, or moving forward perhaps in a soul, or perhaps through our offspring, which we were just talking about with Mr. Wagner. But today we ask, why live forever? Why is it so important? And what happens when we realize that we just can't?
People around the world are waking up to a new year, some of them hungover from celebrating the arrival of 2013. Reason enough to make a resolution and cut back on alcohol, and maybe even abstain totally. New Year is a time to look to the future and give up bad habits. Quitting smoking, eating less, getting more exercise are just a few of the resolutions that people make. So welcome to 2013. What resolutions have you made to help make it your best year yet?
What is a new year? Why is it so important to us, Stephen? Is it a way for us to defy time by saying, this time I'm going to do it better?
Not when we do it right. I think a New Year's resolution works when we understand it as a way of marking time's passing. We look back on the year that has gone, and we look forward, and we realize, ideally, that our time is limited, and we resolve to make the most of what we have. Now, this might at first sound a little morbid because, of course, what I'm talking about is facing up to mortality. But I think that only if we do that, only if we realize that our time is limited, can we really value it, can we really see our time as precious. And, of course, usually we get caught up in the day-to-day, we get caught up in our habits and daily routines, going to work, looking after the children. And it's rituals like celebrating the passing of one year and the starting of another year and making New Year's resolutions. They're a real opportunity to take the big picture, to step back from these routines and ask us what we really want from our lives.
You say in your book, and I think this is interesting, you say that humans have found 4 ways of trying to become immortal. Let's go through those just a little bit. One is trying to live forever in this body we have. I mean, you could be like Mr. Wagner here, you could live the Dolce Vita in Italy. You could drink lots of espresso and live forever. Go to your doctor.
No Dolce Vita.
He says no to that. But talk to me a little bit about that. Is that where we are right now? Is that maybe the most salient notion of living forever right now?
Well, what's interesting is that all cultures have some version of these 4 stories about how we can defy death. So the same stories get told again and again by different generations, just using the vocabulary that suits their time. So just like all cultures have had some idea of an elixir of life that will allow us to stay alive in these bodies, we've got ours too, and that's, of course, biomedicine, biotechnology. We read all the time in newspapers about the next cure for cancer, the next elixir of life in the form of crushed flatworms or stem cells or nanotechnology or something. Right. So this is a very widespread belief in our society.
Okay, so that's one. The other one you say is resurrection.
Well, the idea is if we recognize that most people who have so far taken an elixir of life are now 6 foot under, okay, we need a backup plan. Okay. And resurrection is the backup plan. So it's the idea that if this body has to die, nonetheless it can be reborn and live again. It's what we see at Easter time, in springtime, in nature, for example. It's what Jesus did. So it's part of a lot of religions. It's what the Egyptians thought the mummies would do. Mm-hmm. And those people who now have their bodies frozen, this is called cryonics, hope that one day, just like God for Christians is going to resurrect them in believers in the future. These people hope that benevolent scientists will resurrect them in the future.
The next point you bring up is we try to live eternally by doing it through our soul.
Well, many people think the whole body is just too messy and unreliable to guarantee us immortality. And resurrection is just too much like a bad zombie film. And these people instead rely on the soul,
okay.
A more immaterial, spiritual way of living forever. And this is a hugely widespread view. It's fundamental to all major religions and is still as widespread as it ever has been.
And I think I even remember seeing in the video that you made that someone has actually even claimed to have weighed the soul, actually knows how much it weighs.
That's right. An American doctor 100 years ago, he put dying people on a bed that was on an enormous scales, and he continually weighed them while they were dying. They were perhaps begging for water or morphine or something, but no, he was like, right, I've got the scales running. And then when these people finally died, he worked out that they became 21 grams lighter.
So the soul weighs 21 grams.
That was his conclusion.
Okay, interesting. The fourth point, you say, is legacy is a way of becoming immortal. What does that mean, legacy?
Well, there have always been people who are skeptical about the existence of a soul, the idea that the real me can live on in some immaterial, invisible thing.
Well, we can't see the soul, right? It's hard to prove.
Exactly. And increasingly, brain science suggests that the real me is dependent upon my brain, not upon some immaterial soul. So if you give up on the idea of the soul, what you've got left is legacy, the idea of living on more indirectly, if you like, through the echo that you leave in the world. And that can be through your genes, or it can be through your works. It can be anything, any parts of you that live on, even if the real you has disappeared.
All right, so with that, we're talking about it could be through your deeds or through your works, such as Mr. Wagner's great-grandfather. What Hayo's been talking about, the Machiavellian tendencies of people, power, politics, making your mark there, or what a lot of people do is just make babies, right?
Exactly.
You've got, what, how many, 3?
I've got 3 children.
See, so you're going to be immortal for a very long time.
And I've just written a book.
And
I'm working
you've just
hard
written
on
a
my
book.
legacy.
Very good legacy, right? What happens, well, first of all, what does all of this tell us? Aren't we simply afraid of dying?
That's exactly right. When we look at what lies behind these 4 strategies to achieve immortality that keep resurfacing, what we see is the fear of death.
But why? I remember hearing, even when I was growing up, from preachers, from priests, pastors, talking about the heaven, the life that awaits us. If that realm is so appealing, is so perfect, then why are we so afraid of leaving this world?
That's a good question. And it suggests many of these believers don't believe as hard as they might claim to. But the fear of death is completely instinctive. It's deep within us. It's deep in our genes. Any organisms, any living things that aren't afraid of death will quickly disappear from the gene pool. If we weren't afraid of death, we might have fun jumping out of planes without a parachute and not caring about it.
Okay, so that's to protect ourselves. But we're intelligent beings. Why can't we come to terms with the finiteness of ourselves?
Well, we can, but it's not easy. So most of the time we tell ourselves these stories that recur again and again through different civilizations about how death is not real, about how in fact we can live forever. But equally, there have always been people who have questioned these stories and said, look, if we look behind the fear of death, we can see that it's natural but not rational, that actually we needn't fear death. That death, when properly understood, is like a horizon which we can never look beyond, and nothing beyond that horizon can harm us.
Are you afraid of dying?
I've come to terms with it. At first I was, and researching the question of immortality and writing the book has been a journey for me. And by the end of it, when I realized that these 4 paths to immortality, that none of them were going to deliver what they promised, by that time I had also realized actually that wasn't so bad.
Let me ask the other gentleman here. Mr. Wagner, are you afraid of dying?
I'm not, because I had, I think, a very intensive, extraordinary, I think sometimes even privileged life, and I should be grateful. And I have a son who gives me a lot of hope. He's doing well. We have a very intensive talk, discussion, daily life, so I should be satisfied. And
you certainly have a lot of passion, that's for sure.
So I'm also dedicating myself a lot to him. You know, it's very important for me. Also, the next generation, and the next generation, when you have given some love, and so I think it's. I'm not so much afraid of that.
Okay, what about you, Hayo? Are you afraid?
I share this idea of being grateful that I had a good life up to now. Last year in 2012, I had it was a bike race in Berlin, the Veloton, 120 kilometers on the bike. And there was an old gentleman, he was 82 years, and it was, say, something like 2 kilometers before the finish line. Yeah. He just fell off the bike dead. Yeah. And I was really jealous. I said, wow. In the moment when you are doing what you like most, racing the bike, you're immediately dead, no dying process, you're just dead. Yeah. That's just the best way of saying goodbye.
And wouldn't that be, Stephen, when you think, isn't that the ideal way to end this life, is when you're maybe at your best, when there's no suffering, there's no decay, there's this euphoria, and then you're gone.
That's perfect, it's exactly right. Birth and death both, in a way, act like frames of a picture that frame our life. And the best thing that can possibly happen, if you're living life to the full and then suddenly...
Okay, well, I've been told we've got 1 minute. Very briefly, gentlemen, New Year's resolutions, do you have them? If you do, tell me, what are they? Stephen, start with you.
They have to be specific if they're going to work half an hour a day with my children, drawing and writing and doing something creative.
All right, so spending more time with your legacy. Mr. Wagner.
Of course, I have very clear hopes for this year, 2013, regarding concrete projects of peace, regarding Middle East, my preoccupation regarding Egypt.
Okay, very good. And Hayo, yours?
Extreme egoistic, more time, unspecific, more time for myself, having fun, having even more sense in life.
I agree.
For myself.
Lots of health, and lots of health.
Of course.
And we want to wish everyone out there watching also a very happy New Year, lots of love, health, and happiness for you. That is going to wrap up this first agenda for 2013. Don't forget, you can watch the show again online. You see the address right there. And don't be shy. Tell us what you think about the show. Our inbox is always open at agenda.english@dw.de. I'm Brent Goff in Berlin. Thanks for stopping by. Happy New Year. Join me next time when I set the agenda.